from here. Okay, so what is it about women and science that I would like to talk about? I would just like to give a few remarks, maybe more than a few, on the dynamics between women and science that started in the 1980s. You might say, why 1980s, where in 2018, that was so long ago. But it was a decisive time. Okay, the 1980s was when it all began, when this so-called feminist philosophy of science began, when women philosophers began to, I'm talking about philosophers because I'm trained in philosophy, okay? When women philosophers began engaging with the discipline of science, when they are asking, what does this do for us? Where do we go? How do we engage with this? Women and science have historically not been one, okay? Women, as the historical accounts show, have been a bit not included, not always included in the scientific world. Why? You know, how they have dealt with this problem, we will try to see. So I will focus on what I call the interplay between women, gender, and science. I will also introduce to you the feminist critique of science, the issues that the feminist movement has taken when talking about science, and in the end, I will try to give an evaluation and maybe we can see where we are today, and also where we might be in the future. So the key issue that I would like to address here is the key issue that needs to be addressed actually in talking about women and science is that there is a widespread confidence in the neutral character of scientific knowledge. Okay, scientific knowledge is objective, is neutral. Okay, it is something that anybody can reach, okay, you do it right. It is something that is out there, okay? It is objective. This is, in a nutshell, this is, in short, the issue that feminists have taken, okay? How and why? Let's see. Now, why do I go back and talk about something that happened in the 1980s? Because this this critique, this gender critique, this debate is still current and very much alive today. A lot of people say, no, it's the issue between women and science has been solved. And we have, in many areas, more women than men in science, okay? We are, you know, the doors are open. There's equal opportunity. There is affirmative action. There is all of that. So why are we still talking about this? You will hopefully see why I'm still talking about this by the end of this talk. So it also remains an extraordinarily fruitful resource with which to dig into history, okay, this gender perspective. And it also allows us to see that where we are at present, it was not a necessary result of the past, okay? We could have gone in other ways. Instead, where we are today happens for, you know, was not a necessary outcome. Let me just say that. So it's an unnecessary result of the power dynamics that in the end preserved male dominance under the guise of what is universal knowledge, objective knowledge, neutral knowledge, okay? And hopefully we will be able to, after this, to look for an alternative for which it will make sense for us as women to work in the future. Now, before going into all of that, let me just introduce to you these two approaches to the debate in gender and science. And if I'm speaking too fast, if I'm rolling my words, please just say stop, okay? Or slow down. Be more than happy to stop. If I have to go back to pinpoint one moment where feminism, the feminist movement, women, came into a direct contact with science, it would be with the publication of the book, The Science Question in Feminism, okay? And that was written by Sandra Harding, and it was published in the year 1986, okay? She summed it up best, how women and science have interacted, okay? So let me just introduce this to you, all right? She says that there have been two approaches. Okay, one is what we call the reformist approach. Okay, the other one is what she calls the revolutionary approach. How do they differ? She says, we began by asking, this is in the yellow part. First of all, when women came into science, what is to be done about the situation of women in science? What does it mean? Not enough women. Okay, so this is the situation of women in science, the problem of women in science. We call it, you know, the woman problem in science. There are not enough women. Okay, what do we do? So asking, okay, and now it has shifted, and this shift happened in the very late 1970s to the very early 1980s, okay? And this shift was a very important one. It shifted from the woman question in science to the science question in feminism. The question changed to, is it possible to use for emancipatory ends sciences that are apparently so intimately involved in Western bourgeois and masculine projects? Okay, what is the big shift? The big shift is the first one. Science was the reference point. Okay, it's the woman question in science, and it has shifted to using feminism as the reference point. Now it has become the science question in feminism. Okay, this was a historic shift. Okay, in the interaction between women and science. The first one was, how do we solve this problem of the lack of women? The second one was, how do we, as women who are in science, how do we use these scientific means for our own purposes? Okay, so this was a very historic shift. Okay, so what are the issues? What about this shift? Two issues here that I would like to address from now to the very end of the talk. First of all, can we say that there was an evolution, that because of the reformist attitude, it evolved into this revolutionary attitude? Okay, is that clear? The preliminary answer is actually what we've seen in the past 30 years went in the opposite direction. Okay, instead of the reformist, instead of having the reformist approach evolve into a revolutionary one, it turns out that, you know, we have stopped with the reformist approach, which is where we seem to be today. I will say more about this with time. So the second issue is that there is a certain use of gender in the feminist critique of science. Okay, at first it was used as a category of self-assurance, okay, that this is a rich concept. We use gender in order to refer to more than just women. We use gender to refer to not only the biological woman, but we use it to refer to different sexualities, different gender orientations, different understandings of anything that surrounds reproduction, okay? This has changed too in the past 30 years, because now it has shifted from being used all of that to actually being referred to women in particular, okay? The gender question in science is now, where are women? Okay, so in other words, we're going back to where we were, to asking, what do women do in science? So it becomes, again, the woman question in science, okay? So anyway, let's first talk about the revolutionary perspective. I will move on from this to the reformist perspective and then end the talk with a an evaluation. The revolutionary perspective, which says that, oh, we will use science for women's own ends. Okay, how do we do that? There were two ways that they have that feminists have engaged in it. The first is what I call the historical approach. Okay, which involves the reinterpretation of history. Let's just say. All right, I will explain this in a few moments. The second is called the epistemological approach. And it's not about the historical process, but it questions how we get knowledge that is scientific. Okay? What is the nature of this so-called scientific knowledge, and how does it affect women? Okay, so let me explain them separately. The historical approach, again, there was one work that was very decisive in talking about this, and that is the work by Carolyn Merchant, The Death of Nature, Women, Ecology, and the Scientific Revolution. Okay, so what she did was she went back to analyze the capitalist revolution together with the scientific revolution in the 1500s to the 1600s, continuing to the industrial revolution in the 1700s. What she did, this is the historical approach, okay? So we're going to look at history. She focuses her study on the metaphorical shift, a metaphor, okay? The metaphorical shift, she talks about the death of nature, okay? And she talks about the death of the female in the transition from the Middle Ages to the Renaissance that brought Europe from the widespread metaphor of the world as organism to the world as machine. What does it mean? A geocentric world prior that was, widespread prior to the scientific revolution had humans be a part of it, okay? The geocentric world was from the perspective of humans, okay? The sun and the moon revolved around us. We were at the center. This was the human perspective, okay? So what happened was that the world was an organism. It was a part of us. We understood the world, and humans understood the world through your own senses, okay? You see this. This is how the world was, okay? Now, this was a metaphor that was used as well. It was nature. Nature was what was interconnected with us. And then, boom, all right, all of this changed because it was not the way things were. The way things were resulted in a heliocentric universe, okay, where we are just a part of it. And even though we see that the moon and the sun and the stars revolved around us, it's not the way things are. So, according to Carolyn Merchant, this causes a distance between us and nature, okay, alongside with the project of the scientific revolution, the need to understand nature, to know nature, to use nature in the philosophies of Descartes, of Bacon, of all of that. Nature becomes a machine. Nature becomes a mechanistic element. Nature becomes something to manipulate for humans' own ends, okay? So this was what she called the death of nature, okay? And she says, metaphorically speaking, and I know I'm going to regret this after I say this, okay? Because when I was reading this for the first time, I threw the book away and I thought, what a bunch of nonsense, okay? Many years later, here I am talking about this, rereading it, thinking, yeah, I was premature in making that judgment, okay? Why? Because in talking about the death of nature, there is, what we need to acknowledge as well is that there is a very close correlation between the concept of nature and the concept of the female, okay? If we think in terms of the widespread dichotomy that operates in our thinking, nature, culture, okay? Females, males. Females would be more on the side of nature. Why? The female body is more bound to, the cycle of, reproduction. It is, women were more relegated to the private realm, okay, to the point where creative culture becomes something that was outside. Women were somehow on the other side. But on the side of nature, there was also passivity, okay, in opposition to activity. There was also emotion as opposed to reason, okay? There was also all of these divisions. So when nature died, according to Carolyn Merchant, these things fall outside of the realm of reason as well. They become unreason. Okay, so they have, and according to her study, these things have become unreasoned. And women as well, females of the world as well. The world which we used to be a part of, which we saw, things revolving around us, now becomes something alien, something that we study, preferably, which I'll get into this later, not using the senses. Okay, again, so modern science freed itself from a respect for nature, okay, the living body, okay, the natural world, and started to take it apart, to disassemble and reassemble it as a collection of inanimate parts, okay, something that we can control and, subject to the transformation of human intervention, following human purposes and projects. What was her point in this book? Her point is that when we say human, we actually mean men, okay? We actually mean men. So where am I getting? The realm of science has been more closely related to the workings of men than to the workings of women, okay? So again, this was not a point that people like to hear, okay? People say, come on, this is so far-reaching, it's metaphorical. Why are you taking this as something literal? It's something that could or could not be, depends on interpretation, okay? However, this is what she says. She says, we're not doing history, all right? We're trying to do feminist history. What does it mean? It requires that we look at history differently. Okay, we have to see it from the viewpoint of women. We have to put women in the foreground in order to read this history so that it makes a difference in our lives. We're not distorting, but we're trying to see where the female is in all of this. Okay, so, we're looking at the previously ignored, something previously ignored as the underlying resources on which Western culture and, its progress have been built. This is full of typos, I'm sorry. Okay, and so to write history from a feminist perspective is to turn it upside down. Okay, but it's there. All right, even metaphorically, it's there. So what happened? Okay, again, between the 1500s, and 1700s, there was an incredible transformation. Okay, I would just point your attention to this. Okay, nature, women, blacks, okay, people who are naturally a certain way. This was also where racism started, okay? Women can't help being women because they're naturally so. Blacks can't help being blacks because they're naturally so. So things that are tied to nature become something unscientific, okay? Becomes something that falls outside of its realm, okay? So if it becomes nature, what does it mean? It becomes a resource for the modern world system, okay? It becomes a resource. So, now, perhaps the ultimate irony, she says, in this transformation was the new name given to them, rationality. All right, because that was the key word for the scientific revolution. So we have rationality as keyword. Evelyn Fox Keller, another big name in feminist philosophy of science. Okay, this is the part that I took issue with. Okay, this is the part that I'm sure that a lot of you would shake your head and go, oh, this is nonsense. Okay, this is reading too much into text, but hear me out. Okay, if anything, for entertainment purposes. All right. She says the most immediate issue for a feminist perspective on the natural sciences is the deeply rooted popular mythology that shows objectivity, reason, and mind as male, and nature as female. Okay, so in the division of emotional and intellectual labor, women have been the guarantors and protectors of the personal, the emotional, the particular, whereas science, okay, the province par excellence of the impersonal, the rational, and the general has been the preserve of men. This is where it comes in. This is where the metaphor actually becomes materialized. Okay, it stops being merely metaphorical, but it becomes something deep-rooted in our own understanding of science. Okay, So, of course, this was fiercely opposed, okay, by males and females scientists alike. Why? When you start saying, look, there is a division here, women scientists at that time already say, no, there is none. Because if there is, we cannot participate in science. Okay? So, many feminists rejected the stereotype, okay, that the female brain, for example, is incapable because we're more natural or more whatever, you know, but precisely because they were convinced that science is neutral, they would not accept being excluded from it. Okay, so why should they accept that there was this metaphor at work? No. Okay, it's better to say, no, we're all like, you know, we can participate in science as good as well as men do. When I was a graduate student, I was the first female Asian, okay, to be admitted into the PhD program in the United States, and not in that school, okay. First female Asian. I thought, wow, this is a big step. Now I'm in, okay? Now I'm in. But then what? Okay, I'm in, but I still have to face male professors who lock their door once you go into their room to talk to them, okay? I still had to do philosophy the way that was very much based on the methodologies that has been practiced by male philosophers for a very long time. I had to become one of them, okay? I had to use those tools, those methods, which may not correspond to my own experiences, but I was there, okay? At first, I thought that was the best thing that has happened, and then I soon enough learned that it wasn't enough, okay? It wasn't enough just to be included in the program, just to be one of them, okay? I was one of the 5 women in the program, and although it was a lot for a philosophy department, it was not enough, okay? I was still the woman in the program. Even though I said, look, I can study philosophy as well as you do. I can interpret text as well as you do. I can write as well as you do, okay? I can teach as well as you do. Was it enough? No. Okay, well, so what happens here? Okay, there was an awareness that the most abstract and pure provisions of scientific rationality are not at all neutral. Okay, it was not neutral, but they reflect the gender characteristics in which the masculine developed in Europe and in the United States in the modern age. Okay, and that reflects the ancient rules of patriarchy. Okay, the division of nature and culture, the association of the women with nature, the association of other values such as passivity, emotionality, partiality, non-neutrality with the side that belongs to the female. The dichotomy is at play, and it's not just saying, I'll cross over the dichotomy. You can't do it just by saying that. Okay, now let me introduce another work of Evelyn Fox Keller. She talks in an article called The Mind's Eye, okay, she says that one major, this is a bit philosophical, but, you know, one major characteristic of the modern science, okay, is the objectification, okay, that separates the subject and the object. Okay, so in other words, there's a separation between the individual who perceives something and the object that is perceived. And usually it translates into a formula of S knows that P. All right, okay, let's just say S knows that P. S is the subject, P is a proposition. Okay, so somebody knows something. The attention here, the attention has always been on the P. What is known? Okay, what is that proposition that is known? Assuming that S is a placeholder for any human being, all right? Under the perfect, conditions, everybody would be able to get to this proposition, this piece of knowledge in the same way. Scientific knowledge will be revealed to you under these neutral conditions. Okay? So there's the objectivity and the separation. Feminists are taking issue with that, saying this is not always the case. Because who this S is, who this subject is, matters on how knowledge is perceived. Okay? On what you see. On the conditions that may or not may be possible for this S to see that P. Okay? I'm sorry, I'm getting a bit, a bit abstract here, but there is a division. Okay? So it's not only this division, but there's also another division. There's a separation of knowledge from the unreliability of the senses. Okay? Now, the moon and the stars are not revolving around us anymore. So how do we know this? We have new astronomical theories. We have new physics theories. We have everything to explain to us how the world really is. That differs from our own perception. Okay? So what do? Look at René Descartes. Descartes says that, we have to be completely divorced, okay? And seeing with the eye is not the same as seeing with the intellect. Only seeing with the intellect guarantees perfect knowledge. All right? Okay, I'm not going to get into the detail of this. Newton, even stronger, he says that, Newton expressed a profound preoccupation with looking. Okay, but that doesn't use the outer eye, but uses somehow the inner eye, the understanding, the faculty of comprehension. Okay, and so much so that it was said that for Newton, the ideal of science was to see what God saw, not what humans saw. All right, so science was that powerful. All right, it enables you to see ideally what God saw. Okay. So, now, let me move on a little bit more, all right? Here, we get back to Evelyn Fox Keller, who talks in her article, The Paradox of Scientific Subjectivity, about something that should be of interest to us here. She continues using, this is, one of the best-known paintings where the technique of perspective has been used. Okay, the technique of perspective. What does it mean? It means that objects that are farther away appear to us smaller than objects that are closer to us. All right? There was a time when this technique was not alive, when everything was on a flat surface in front of us. This was not it. Okay. What Evelyn Fox Keller did in this article, in this study, was to show that with this, what happens is the realization that where you are and who you are matters in seeing things. Okay? If you are here, yes, you see this is bigger. However, it also opens up the possibility that if you are somewhere else, you see something different. Okay? So the law of perspective itself introduces this, but in combination with views like Descartes, like Bacon, and all that, it begs the question, or it invites the question of whether there is a view from nowhere where everything could be seen, okay? And that view from nowhere happens to not be seen through the eyes, but in the mind. So a total separation between the subject and the object of study, a total separation between the intellect and the senses, okay? And who is on the side of the senses? It's women, okay? It's always the female. All right, the senses. Now, so, if we change our position, we change our viewpoint, okay, and all that. So let me skip this. Now, also, it's not just the study of perspective, but it's also a study of something, something more profound than that, okay? We look at, you might say, this is all metaphorical. but at the same time, this metaphor operated as an essential element. For example, there was here, okay, Evelyn Fox Keller again. Okay, no, let me move back a little bit. Let me talk about this first. We're talking about certain paradoxes. We're talking about, remember, we're talking about the revolutionary approach here, okay? The revolutionary approach. We have the historical approach, the epistemological approach, how we know things, how we, rewrite history, how we do whatever. The idea is that this is paradoxical. It results almost in a paradox. Why? Because we talk about the universal character of science. We talk about the objectivity, all right? But the absolute and universal canon of objectivity reflects the particular and partial subjectivity that shape the identity of the male gender. In other words, the character that claims to be universal and impartial and neutral of scientific knowledge reflects male knowledge, historically speaking. All right? So the neutrality was partial. That's the first paradox that we can talk about. Okay? It's paradoxical. So, also there was Evelyn Fox Keller studied Bacon, Francis Bacon. Okay? A work that was not widely read at all. It was not even published in Bacon's lifetime. It's called The Masculine Birth of Time. Okay, The Masculine Birth of Time. What happened? Okay, Evelyn Fox Keller was showing that what was emerging was a masculine virile science. Okay, Bacon had, a character, who was a man turning to God in prayer, and then the man became the mature scientist, had with his son, and nature then becomes this, female, the indubitably female, the object of action. Okay. And they said, and what she studied was, okay, this is a historical text, but do we notice the gender metaphor that operates in it? He says, okay, ancient language, okay, I'm come in very truth, leading you to nature with all her children to bind her to your service and make her your slave, okay? This reflects the early modern sentiment, okay, where Descartes says, we need to, study, understand nature in order to be masters and possessors of nature, okay? So it's an appropriation. And, there's even a more sexual metaphor where it says, neither ought a man to take scruple, so a man shouldn't hesitate to entering and penetrating into these holes and corners when the inquisition of truth is his whole object. This work is filled with language like this, okay, which a lot of people consider to be a sexual metaphor, a study of nature that is closely associated with the female. So the metaphor becomes something more than a metaphor. It becomes almost an operational tool that's used in these works, all right? So, revolutionary approach, done. We have historical approach, epistemological approach. Now, let's go to the reformist approach, okay? So, in those same decades, in the 1980s, beginning of, 1990s as well, the women's movement gained force, okay? And so, it tried to claim full rights of access to scientific training. Women wanted, equal opportunity, and they wanted to work equal to men in all research fields, okay? Include us, okay? We want to study science, we want to study engineering, we want to study biology, we want to be included and have the same opportunities for research grants, for workspace, for all of that, make it possible. Now, it ensured a lot of things, okay? So there was a lot of an increased presence of female researchers, a very quick increase in the hard sciences, okay? The names, you can guess. Okay, the names have become repeated over and over again. Look at all of these women in science. How can you say there are no women in science and all that? No, the number of women in science have increased. Nobody challenges that fact, okay? What is the real success, however, of the reformist movement, reformist perspective, is not how, there are more women in science, but it is that the choice of a woman to engage in scientific or technological profession is now recognized as normal. Okay? It's normal for women to study science, to be a scientist, to whatever. It's no longer an anomaly. It's no longer, something must be wrong with her, okay? And so there is this process that we call normalization in science, okay? So what is it? It's the recognition of the ability of a woman to conduct science in the same way with men, and not as an exceptional condition, but as something normal. Okay, this is the reformist approach. It is also the approach that has been used by the UN, for example, in their so-called gender mainstreaming program. There are not enough women in science, let's put more women in, okay? Let's put more women in. In philosophy, in feminist theories, we call it the add women and stir approach, okay? Which means you increase the number without changing the structure of the institution, okay? Add women, all right? Everything is the same, but there are more women, okay? That is the point of the reformist approach, all right? I'll get to this in a bit, okay? So, this would reveal how fully the revolutionary and the reformist path have really diverted from each other. One wants to question the institution, the understanding, the conception of science itself, the history. The other one wants to have women in there. Why? Because there is no inequality, all right? Women are as capable as men in doing science. Let's put them in there, okay? So this seems to be, for better or for worse, where we are today, all right? There are more women in science. So, in fact, wanting to conduct science like men, okay, and claiming to be capable, okay, this actually has emptied the revolutionary approach to the feminist critique of science of meaning. What does it mean? What does the category of woman mean? What does it mean female? What does nature mean? What does spectator mean? What does subject or object mean? Okay, is there anything? The reformist movement normalizes all of these processes, so it takes away the strength of the revolutionary approach. This is paradoxical. All right? This is paradoxical. So, who practices science doesn't matter. Okay? What matters is only the unequivocal correctness of the implemented logical and experimental procedures. Who S isn't important. Okay, as long as S is put in a condition to realize P. P being objective, being neutral, all of that. So, there are still some foundation that remains shared between these two, but, you see the divergence here. Now, what happened is that more women in science led to a more, class action, but let's just put it that way. So they become more resolute in standing up to the the gender discrimination in laboratories, in research, in organization, production of research. Okay. So what happened is also that there is a greater increase. Women in science, L'Oreal, okay, and all of that, who promotes these things. So women become more visible. Women scientists was a project of, even of the National Research Council of Italy that ran a project on women in science, okay, in order to try to find ways to increase the presence of women in STEM, okay, in science, technology, engineering, mathematics, something like that. So, what does it mean? It means that they see that the problem is that there are not enough women, okay? They're not questioning what the radical approach, what the revolutionary approach is trying to question. Okay? But we have to ask, now that there are more women here, okay, how much these characterizations are appropriate, okay? Do these characterizations, adhere to stereotypes that even within an improved, social, cultural status, still puts the feminine closer with nature, okay? Still puts the feminine in charge of, a lot of things that has to do with interhuman management, okay? Or with, dealing with people, and all of that, okay? Are we really alike? Do we practice science? Is that enough? All right? In a lot of places, I still see that women who are managing the workplace, people who are managing the workplace are women, okay? Why? Because they have more interpersonal skills, because they have more, human skills, because they have more relational capacities. But what does this mean? It means that even now, okay, these stereotypes still function. They are more women, but they're performing the same roles as they used to in the past before these things were questioned and forgotten about. All right? So we're still here. There's more of us. Does that mean that science has changed? Not really. Okay? Now, two paradoxes, and I'm going to end this soon because I think I have almost exceeded my time. Have I? Okay, so what Evelyn Fox-Keller says is that, yeah, of course, the influx of women into science has changed the face of science. But, question, has it in any observable way changed the actual doing of science? Okay, has the face of science changed? Okay, one might argue that changing the face of science does in itself change the doing of science, but not, I believe, in the ways people tend to think of first, okay? So have the women themselves changed the doing of science? Have they, by their own example, brought a new legitimization of traditionally feminist values into the practice of science? Okay, probably not, okay? We are in science, doing science in the exact same way that science has been done throughout history, okay? In the same way that I started out doing philosophy, in the same way that philosophy has been done, okay? Using the tools, the methodologies, and all of that has been in existence for a long time already. So, paradox one here is that a revolution, okay, the revolutionary approach, a revolution took shape through the reformist path, but it was not a revolution that they expected. It was a revolution of having more women, okay? Having more women in science, okay? What does it mean? It means that now, the reformist approach has led to a boom of women in science. Have the questions changed? They said, yeah, some of the questions have changed. For example, especially research that has to do with reproduction, having babies, okay? There was one time, well, in some places it still functions this way, where the ovum, where the egg, the female egg, is considered something passive, okay? Reproductive technology for a long time rested on the understanding that the egg was passive and that the sperm was active, okay? So what happened? With more women in there, once the gender bias was overcome, this changed the practice. This changed the understanding of reproduction, of how we understand infertility, how we understand, creating life. At the same time, we still have the widespread understanding in society. I'm going to give you an example of someone close to me, a friend of mine, okay, who had 3 failed pregnancies in 1 year, okay? 3 failed pregnancies. Now, 2 of them resulted in, all of them resulted in the first, 8-9 weeks of pregnancy, okay, where, the heartbeat was gone. But one of them was due to what you call a blighted ovum, which means that the ovum failed to develop. And so there was no embryo. There was no little thing that had the heartbeat. Okay? So it was 3 failed pregnancies. Now, how do you understand that? A failed pregnancy was traumatic, okay, for the person who was pregnant. Now, think of it this way. Her gynecologist told her all of these three are considered failed pregnancies, okay? You were pregnant, these were losses of pregnancies. However, her husband told her, no, you only had 2 failed pregnancies because the third one, the blighted ovum, was not really a pregnancy. Why? Because there was no thing, no embryo, no whatever that you want to call it. But this reflects a very scientific way of understanding. I'm sure that there is an emotional explanation behind it, but the understanding is that there is no interaction between the subject and the phenomenon that she is experiencing. You judge, a pregnancy from the existence of an embryo. But in a blighted ovum, where the embryo failed to develop, what happened is that the hormones still changed, okay? She still underwent bodily changes, hormonal change, preparing, with the thickening, lining of the uterus, hormonal changes again, and resulting in having to undergo a process not very much unlike the first 2, okay? So, what happened? All right, how do we get away from defining scientific knowledge just from, was there an embryo, was there no, so failed pregnancy, no failed pregnancy. It reminds me of a dog that, of a cousin of mine that, I knew when I was a girl. This dog, for some reason, has a condition where her body tells her that she's pregnant, okay? But she doesn't have a baby. But her body develops conditions of being pregnant. She started having, breasts and started having bigger, belly and all that. And she would go steal a toy doll, and play with it as if it was a baby. Okay? Each time she gets taken to the vet, you see enlarged, uterus, you see enlarged breasts, and she believes that she was pregnant. Okay? And it's in the same way that this person that I'm talking about believed that she was pregnant. Now, why is it that this objective piece of understanding that, because there was no embryo, you were not pregnant, why was it used and not the other understanding that, hey, her body changed, okay? Her hormones was pregnant, okay? Showed pregnancy. Why was this not considered a case of being pregnant? All right, so these are competing pieces of knowledge. But still today, technically speaking, was that a pregnancy? Well, the answers would differ. So also, the paradox, the second paradox, and I'll end soon, is again the use of gender, which, as I've said, now has, often stands for women. Again, we have this gender mainstreaming, gender and science program. Okay. So it's in saying that the gender and science program has the sole intention of increasing the number of women. It means that the questioning of different sexualities, different gender identities, different, personal identities has become reabsorbed. The strength of the revolutionary concept has been reabsorbed by the reformist perspective, making it again an empty one. Okay? So, there is an importance of the issue of awareness, okay, in the sense that we need to rethink again the category of gender in order to ask if it's still capable of representing the complexity of the issue. Now, what do? We're here. We're more women in science, okay? Science still asks, we do science in the same way and all that, okay? How do we change this? Okay, how do we change this? Well, there are many ways that they have proposed. One of the ways, still, I believe, is strongly related to the revolutionary spirit, which means to question the basic conceptions of science. All right? What does it mean? Okay, Emily Fox Keller says, my view of science and of the possibilities of at least a partial sorting of cognitive from ideological, blah, 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 blah. Okay, is the reclamation from within science, of science as a human instead of a masculine project, and the renunciation of emotional and intellectual labor that maintains science as a male preserve. All right? What does it mean? Science needs to reflect the needs of women. Not merely the need to be included in the profession, but the need to understand the universe according to their own experiences as well. Okay? Scientific research needs to be open enough for things like this. Research that has to do with women need to be given space, need to be given importance, not as a hobby, not as a sideline, something that needs to be masked, hidden under something else. It needs to be a full discipline in itself. Okay, so how does she propose to do that? Well, Evelyn Keller says that this is premised on the transformation of the very categories of male and female. We go back to the revolutionary spirit, and correspondingly of mind and nature. Okay, so to the extent that she said that I aspire to a different kind of science, that science would be different by virtue of being gender-free. It would be a science practiced by both men and women in a different ideological context. All right? This is not adding women and stir. This is adding women, but at the same time, also making sure that you're not adding women and stirring them into a previously male construct, but adding them to something where they would be contributing as well. So, what might be some of the models that we could use? One of the models is, what we call scientific biographies. All right? What does it mean? A lot of women scientists have written biographies about their predecessors, about, the people who matter to them, people whose work have influenced them. A lot of that, okay? What they did in science, no. In all of this, they believe that the change is that it allows for a space, a legitimate space, and an interaction between the writer, the biographer, and the object, the biography, in the sense that they are not totally separated from each other. In the sense that the subjectivity of the biographer has an interplay and interaction with the subjectivities of the biography. If I'm writing about somebody who matters to me, who has shaped me, who has whatever, I'm not going to write about her as something distant from me. I'm going to write about her with my own subjectivities included. Okay? So it allows that. It allows a reconnection between subject and object. It allows a reconnection between the person who does the viewing and the object that is being viewed. Maybe this would be, a possibility of, bringing on another revolution. So, can we imagine a similar path to free scientists from the objectivist paradigm? Okay? Instead of just being objective, neutral, impartial, and all that, maybe understand that there is no such thing as perfect impartiality, perfect universality, perfect neutrality, and be a woman and all that, okay? And make sure that there is a platform that makes it okay for you to be a woman doing science in the way that you would like to do it. All right? Thank you.